For no reason whatsoever, let's go over the story of a guy that is probably the hottest name in the hockey world right now. We're going over a player who isn't making a lot of money. He isn't the oldest guy in the world. He isn't the youngest guy in the world. This guy's playing on a Florida Panthers team that you could say has a few names that you're not too familiar with. Rookies in the lineup like Anton Lundell, other guys in the lineup like Carter Verhaeghe who have had some sort of NHL exposure before, but who have never really been mainstay, top tier of the line guys. And today we're going over a player whose 6'4", 209-pound profile is one that is captivating audiences around the world. Let's talk today about Mason Marchment, and who exactly this guy is, where he came from, and just the overall amount of value that this guy is providing the Florida Panthers. Now, if you take a look at Mason Marchment, as we said, 26 years old, 6'4", 209, he's a big guy. Plays on the left side and center. He's making $800,000 a year. And, I mean, he's on his entry-level contract, so there you go. This is a guy who is right there, smack dab in the middle of being a very cheap player. Actually, not in the middle. He's towards the tail end of this period of his career. And if you take a look at his game log with the Florida Panthers, in his most recent 5 games played, he's had 12 points. Okay, that's astounding, actually. In his most recent 10 games, he has had 15 points, so there you go. It drops off a little bit, but he still is a very positive player. He's a plus 12 in his last 5 games, a plus 14 in his last 10. And I wanted to go over the story here of Mason Marchment and what exactly he has gone through to get to this point where now, if you take a look at his NHL point production, he's over a point per game as an entry-level deal player. So, Mason Marchment was drafted He was never drafted as a player who was born in June of 1995, so his draft year actually would have been the 2013 NHL Entry Draft. Back in 2013, he was playing in the Central Ontario Wolves system in the U18 ECHL for the Central Ontario Wolves AAA hockey team. He was a guy getting over a point per game back there, and after graduating from that system in his Draft Plus 1, he made himself the OJHL, which is Junior A hockey in Ontario. After that, though, he made his way over to the OHL, the regular OHL, as a 20-year-old player playing for the Erie Otters. He got himself 26 points in 54 games played. Pretty good, but of course, you know, he's a rookie going over there as a double overage player. Not the worst in the world, but certainly not anything too spectacular. Eventually, 2015-16 rolled around. He played for both the Hamilton Bulldogs and the Mississauga Steelheads, and he was good enough to get himself a contract signed with the Toronto Marlies. In his OHL season that year, he had himself 51 points in a total of 50-ish games played. You do the math over here, 61 games actually. My math was incorrect. And so, as a pretty much end-of-the-line OHL player, a junior guy who was not really having any more years, he signed the contract to go over to the Marlies, and he spent a lot of time in development, let's just say. 2016-17 rolled around, and Mason Marchment had himself 9 games played with the regular Toronto Marlies. He had 1 goal, but playing for the Orlando Solar Bears, he had himself 20 points in 35 games played. The Orlando Solar Bears, they're an ECHL team, so it's the tier below the AHL. Mason Marchment was just a guy who was suiting up here as an extra option for the Marlies, a primary option for the Solar Bears, and in 2017-2018, we sort of started to see the role forming for Marchment with the regular Toronto Marlies. He had 26 points in 44 games played, and if you take a look at scouting reports back in that time frame, this is what was written about Marchment back in Dobber Prospect system from March of that year. Mason Marchment is the son of Brian Marchment. He was not drafted and has worked his way up the pecking order with his solid play. He started in the ECHL with the Orlando Solar Bears after graduating from the OHL after stints with the Bulldogs and the Steelheads. He continues to work very hard and did get to play in a few preseason games. He has played a solid role with the Marlies where he uses his size effectively. He has modest offensive skills, but is solid in corners and in front of the net. Here's another scouting report from that same month. Marchment is one of those players that has managed to carve out a role for himself despite never being drafted. He has good size at 6'4", 200 pounds. He does throw his weight around and is prepared to drop the gloves if needed. While he's not seen as a goal scorer, his hard work, his hard work, has been paying off as he now has 10 goals and 13 assists in 40 games with the Marlies. The Leafs just rewarded Marchment for his solid play by signing him to a 2-year entry-level contract starting in the 2018-19 season. He is still a bit away from the NHL, but he could find himself playing an energy role for the Leafs on the fourth line. He plays a game very similar to the style of a Leo Komarov. And Leo Komarov was a pretty effective NHL player. He's not really the most important guy in the world, but a lot of Leafs fans do remember Uncle Leo and the services he provided. You had yourselves Mason Marchment in the Marlies system who was sort of doing the same thing. And then, in 2018-19, he had himself another year. 25 points in 44 games played instead, so he wasn't really progressing in terms of his statistical profile, but you still saw the maturity come into his game and he started to round things out a little bit more. Amid another strong AHL play, where he racked up 23 points, 56 penalty minutes, and 89 shots on goal in 40 games, Marchment has suffered a broken collarbone and is estimated to be out 2 to 3 months at this time. This is terrible news for the multi-category fantasy forward, and owners will have to hope for a full recovery. He also recovered just in time for the playoffs, put up 1 point in the Marlies' first-round sweep of Rochester. He is being used in the top 6, and he isn't shying away from the front of the net. Eventually, Marchment was dealing with another injury. It kind of slowed him down, and in the Marlies system in 2019-20, he had 18 points in 24 games played. So there you go, a huge statistical improvement. And then he got traded. He was traded over to the Florida Panthers system after signing that contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Take a look at this. It's Mason Marchment in exchange for forward Denis Malgin. Now, Denis Malgin is a guy who, if you take a look at his profile, he's really doing too much for the Maple Leafs. Right now, he's playing for the ZSC Lions in the Swiss League. He's 25, so he is younger than Marchment, but the Maple Leafs traded away this progressing power forward ECHL to AHL guy to the Florida Panthers in exchange for a guy who isn't really doing much with them now. And give it a few more years, Mason Marchment has given us reasons to talk about him. In 2020-2021, he had himself 10 points in 33 games played. This is the shortened season, so he had a lot of guys bouncing around, up, down, taxi squad, whatever, suiting up and playing. But at the very least, Marchment was an NHL caliber guy. He had another contract signed. This time it was one way, so there you go, $800,000 in the AHL should he be sent down there. But this season with the Florida Panthers, Mason Marchment has gone out there with 23 points in 21 games played, highlighted by last night's Florida Panthers stomping of the Columbus Blue Jackets 8-4. Mason Marchment playing on a line with Anton Lundell and Sam Reinhart, which is the third line, by the way. He's playing in a bottom 6 role. This dude had a 6-point game last night. 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points, 6 shots on goal. His center line mate Anton Lundell had 5 assists on the night, and his right winger Sam Reinhart had a hat trick and 4 total points. This line absolutely stomped the Columbus Blue Jackets, and there were chants going on, I believe, on Twitter of people saying, hey, we want 10, because I think the 8th goal was scored somewhere into the third period. I believe by the end of the second, it was already 7-3 or whatever it was, or 7-4, excuse me. But Mason Marchment started out the scoring in the first period with a 32-second goal. He ended off the scoring in the third period with another one that took place right at the beginning of the third, 27 seconds in this time. And Mason Marchment is the ultimate story of a guy who went from an undrafted ETAHL Central Ontario guy going over to Junior A hockey, going over to a very short stint in the major junior scene in the OHL, signing a contract with Toronto, going down to the ECHL in Orlando, working his way up to the main Toronto Marlies system, playing 4 games with the Maple Leafs, getting traded and getting sent down to the Springfield Thunderbirds in the AHL once more, up until the big leagues, where today he is one of the most valuable players in the NHL in terms of the points points per dollar amount. This guy's making $800,000, and he's over a point per game. Now, the rest of his line mates, Sam Reinhart and Anton Lundell, these guys are doing fantastically on the season as well. Lundell, 32 points, 42 games played, and of course Sam Reinhart is a point-per-game player. But Mason Marchment is going out there as such an incredible underdog story that I just had to go out there and make a video because, you know, Leafs fans are talking about this guy, right? He showed up all over the score sheet yesterday, and I thought it would have been funny to go out there and highlight the success in a storytelling sort of way. So, talk to me in the comments, what do you think about Mason Marchment and his path to the NHL? I hope you enjoyed this. What is your Charles 99? And bye.